morning, everyone, and we welcome you to our Sunday morning roundtable discussion. Today is Sunday, July 23rd, 2017. We are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent from the United States of America, Plainfield, New Jersey. And this morning, I will have Tom read Mrs. Eddy's prayer given at the Massachusetts Metaphysical College.
Oh. Oh my God, I offer as a consecrated gift upon thine altar a heart dedicated to thy service, lips speaking only words of charity, love, truth, thoughts striving to be only the true thoughts of the mind of God. Help me to endure unto the end, strong in the faith, powerful in the truth, all the influence that I can bring to bear, all the force of tongue or pen that is mine, I offer in thy service. May heaven help, consecrate, and accept.
And then from miscellaneous writings. We today in this classroom are enough to convert the world if we are of one mind, for then the whole world will feel the influence of this mind, as when the earth was without form, and mind spake, and form appeared. Our lesson subject this morning is truth, golden text from Psalms. Thy word is true from the beginning, and every one of thy righteous judgments endureth forever. And then I just wanted to say from responsive reading, the Lord is nigh unto all them that call upon him, to all that call upon him in truth. Today I really want to get into this topic, truth. I know that I always thought I was very good and very honest, and it took me a long time to realize that either one of those statements is true about myself. Either good, not divinely good, humanly good, or truly honest, although I tried to be honest. And you will find that if you do not get this right sense of truth, it can block your healing, because it's a form of self-deception. So it's very important that we understand that we call upon him in truth. So I would like Linda to find what she wrote on the forum that Mrs. Wilcox wrote in her addresses book.
Okay, from Martha Wilcox. Quote, a personal sense of honesty is always better than dishonesty, but honesty as a personal virtue is merely a sense of personal goodness, and it is devoid of the principle of honesty. It requires understanding on our part to discern between honesty as God's idea and a false sense of honesty, which is a lie of personality endeavoring to make itself equal with God. A personal sense of honesty seeks to glorify persons. But in Christian Science, our one motive for being honest is to glorify God. End quote. There was actually a part. You want me to do the second part?
Go ahead.
All right, quote. And then a second part that came from the same section was, quote, the temptation to be satisfied with human recognition and appreciation often prevents the honest striving for the things of spirit, which is so essential to continued progress and further good. End quote.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to hear comments on this. What does this mean to you? Or, do you feel in your heart you are totally honest with yourself, with God, and with others?
Certainly a lot more than 4 years ago. I know that. I had to lie to myself quite a bit to
how do you lie to yourself?
Well, that personalities I was around, that they were good for me, that I was doing right in life, basically.
And yet you deeply otherwise, felt otherwise deeply?
Oh yeah, I felt like I was being torn apart because of trying to make everything work, I guess. That's why that Unite My Heart thing became here.
Yeah, you wanted to speak any more about that?
Oh, I love that because I feel that since coming here, my heart was really torn in a lot of pieces before coming here, and I feel it, together, and I feel on the right track. I never thought I would be able to feel that way. Very grateful for it.
Thank you. And it shows, even though you're trying to deceive yourself into thinking things are true that aren't true, maybe that your marriage is great when deep inside you think maybe it isn't, or that, just other things that you're not honest about. It does. There's a sense of tearing you apart because deep inside you're denying something, and yet you are trying maybe for appearance sake to keep it up. Thank you, Jeremy. Who else?
I felt that at times too, and for me, this false sense of truth comes in the form of self-justification, where something comes up, I find myself arguing in my own mind, but I am okay, I'm doing right. Look at all these things I've done, and all of the reasonable things that come up to justify my position. But it's all self-centered, because after all, like the Golden Text says, thy word is true from the beginning. And I know when I'm in that mode, I'm not humbly and silently asking God what it is that you have to say here, and I'd be much better off if I did. And only by doing that would I really be truthful.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
I think it's honest. It's important for me now to be honest with myself about how I feel about something. No matter what it is, it's easy for me to maybe say that I feel okay with something when I don't. And if I'm honest, I'm finding with myself when I don't feel right about something, that will cause me to go a little bit deeper to ask God, what He says about the situation, rather than just ignoring it and letting something grow worse.
Thank you. For instance, you're invited somewhere, and maybe you really don't want to go, but everyone in your family or friends or something do and think that you should, and so you go and try to convince yourself that it's the right thing to do, while deep inside you really don't. So, and when you do this is denying your spiritual sense. This is denying God's voice to you. And that's why you have to be honest. You have to face up to your real feelings, to be in touch with how you feel, not how everyone else feels, but how do you feel. Jeffrey?
I was just thinking of Shakespeare's quote, "This above all, to thine own self be true," and wondered what that meant for a long time, but this conversation is shedding a lot of light on it. I think there's a divine sense we have deep inside, and then there's a personal sense we have. So, two are in conflict, obviously. You have to put one in transcendent, divine sense. Be true to yourself to that divine sense.
Yes, and what's the rest of that quote, do you know?
There canst not then be false to any man.
Yes. As it follows the night the day, thou canst be not false to any man.
And what that means is that the best thing you can do for anybody is to be true and honest to yourself. Try to be nice to anybody.
I find that being in between in any way, in any sense at all, is what creates some sort of a friction and uneasiness. And the more I say, well, Father, what do you say? And endeavor to do only His will is where the peace is. Otherwise, any sense of being torn one way or the other is unrest.
Thank you.
I just remember my dad was really tired, and my mother had a whole bunch of people over for some social thing. And all he wanted to do was go to sleep, but he didn't. And he was kind of like non-communicative with people, a bit surly, got in an argument with my mother, and like, and then he said, like, well, I feel like I have to be here, And I'm sort of talking in a human sense, but then maybe it helps us on the spiritual sense. So then I remember my stepdad, similar thing. So many years later, but he just went to bed. No apologies.
Well, that's right.
And
did your dad bless anyone by being there in that state of thought?
Well, it's fascinating. He's a Christian Scientist. My stepdad was not, but
there you go.
my father blessed no one, So
that's right. I used to do that all the time, and inside, was miserable, resenting I was there, and yet kind of, as Bruce was saying, justifying, well, I got to be here. It's my right place. I'm being loving, but not being true to myself. And because of that, you create an atmosphere that people feel. You're much better off being true to yourself and doing what you feel is right, whatever that is.
Also, if you're involved in an organization, there are a couple of things I've been involved in, and people expect you to keep on doing all these things, but I've had to be honest and say, no, sorry, I can't do that anymore because I'm too busy working for my church.
Well, yeah. Well, whatever it takes to get yourself out of situations that you don't feel are right for yourself. And if you make a mistake, God will tell you that too. You'll find out. But
well, I'm not being rude. I'm just being definite.
Well, that's wonderful.
And people respect that.
They do. I don't know how many of you, there have been many of you I know who have, not wanted to tell someone, maybe you're on vacation, and maybe say, well, I'm going to take an hour and call in for church. Because you didn't want to, I don't know, upset your friends because you were going to church for an hour. But then you found out when you did it, everyone understood, and maybe they went on, did whatever they wanted to do. It was okay. It's an okay thing to do if that's in your heart to do. Today we're very blessed. We have Linda here with us.
From Massachusetts.
From Massachusetts, yes, the other one. We have two Lindas, one with a Y, one with an I. From Massachusetts, but she took time out of her traveling schedule to come see us, and we're very grateful for that. Yeah, yay, Massachusetts. So, anyway, anyone else along this line, being honest?
Yeah, this is Essie.
Hi, Essie.
Hi. I really want to be honest, but I don't think I am. No matter how hard I try, I don't think I'll ever be under. That is bothering me because it's like I'm fooling God. No, maybe I am, but deep down myself, I keep on asking, well, what should I do? Because my family, my people, I don't know how much I can give. This is honestly from my heart. And though I keep on saying, casting error and others, I'm still afraid. I love God, but I'm afraid. And it's giving me a lot of thinking. And I don't know. Sometimes I panic. Sometimes I'll be okay. And then another day, something else comes to my mind. Then I'm off again the track. What is worrying me now?
Well, and it's good to find out what are you afraid of. Most people who have that are actually afraid of God. So you have to get rid of your old beliefs, your old theological beliefs as to what God is, a man of wrath, punishment, and understand what he truly is, a God of love, without condemnation, and memorize and work with Mrs. Eddy's definition of God so it replaces your false sense of him. There's nothing to be afraid of, not in science. God has not given you the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind.
I think sometimes when you are taught a different sense of God, and then you come to science, that could be a part of all this.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because there's a period of having to unlearn, right? Isn't
Right. Mm-hmm. And the giving up, going more into what's true through science. That's probably sometimes the underlying the sense.
I think that's right, Florence, because I know I've even had to, coming out of the Boston sense of science, I've had to unlearn. And when you're at the point of like unlearning or giving up a false thing, it can be for a few moments or days or whatever, it can be a little unsettling before you're really firmly settled in what the truth really is. So it can be a little anxiety or whatever as you unlearn and give up things that you had clutched to you and grasp the truth. Because it is by faith that we walk.
Yes, you have to start off accepting things that maybe you were taught that weren't true. And this is the renewing of your mind and casting off the old man for the new. But always, if you are afraid, stop and ask yourself, what, why, what is going on here? And God will tell you, but otherwise it just keeps you running. You can't. You've got to stop and face it. Error is a coward before truth, Mrs. Betty says.
Error doesn't want you to see the truth, and it'll try it in any way, at any time. And you just stay smarter and say no.
Thank you very much. That is a very important point, because in the lesson in Science and Health, Mrs. Eddy says, error would have itself received as mind, as if it were real and God created as truth. But Christian Science attributes to error neither entity nor power, because error is neither mind nor the outcome of mind with a capital M. Error wants you to think the things that aren't true are true. It's a deceiver. It's a charmer, as someone said recently to me. It will try to come in whatever pose it will get you to receive and believe in. That is why you spend time knowing the truth.
In the lesson this week, or I read maybe Hawks, that it pretends that it's your mind.
Absolutely.
And so that's where the problem comes in. Is you think it's you in your mind, and it's not. It's claiming to be your mind.
Thank you. And that's the personal sense of mind, rather than the mind of Christ, the mind of God. That's why simple rule of thumb is to ask yourself, is this a thought from God that loves me? Bob wrote something beautiful on the forum this week, too, about statutes. When you stand in the statutes of God and stand ye still and see the salvation of God, very important, and the importance of knowing what the truth is. Linda wrote, too, about how exhausting it is when you're not honest with yourself. It's exhausting putting up a false front. If you're exhausted all the time, ask yourself, are you being true to yourself? Are you doing what God would have you do, or are you just trying to be something you're not?
I wondered about that, and then I realized that since we lend belief power, then that's why it's exhausting, because we're trying to force these things into being, and they're not supposed to be there.
Yeah. Good.
I also wanted to say about being fearful. Sometimes it's the givens that we accept. I know when I was married before and the marriage wasn't doing well, I took it as like a sign of my impending failure, that I didn't do something. But it wasn't supposed to succeed. It wasn't started from the right place. So that I had to give up that assumption that it was failure or success.
Well, that's good. Thank you very much. And there, Mrs. Eddy's talked about too. There's a tendency, either you're like a hardened sinner and everything just bounces off you. Otherwise, you're this martyr who feels responsible for every problem in the entire universe and blames yourself for them. And of course, both are a personal sense of a selfhood apart from God, which is quite liberating when you cast that old man off. Anyone else about this?
Yes, one thing that has been really helpful lately is that I know I'm not 100% honest with God. And when I was down in Plainfield, I picked up collected writings by, Clear Correct Teachings and Complete Writings by Herbert Eustace. And for once, I'm going from the front to the back of the book instead of starting at the end and going backwards or whichever. And he has such a wonderful outline of how to even recognize there is a God and what God is. He goes very nicely through step by step on the different attributes and the synonyms of God. I think it would be really helpful to this person. In my own sense, it has, because it's giving me a clearer view of God. And as Mrs. Singletary said, he's not God of wrath and to be feared, but who God really is. And it's made that connection better, I feel.
Thank you. Yeah, the Eustace book is wonderful. I know one form of dishonesty that I indulged in was, this pretense of being loving, being nice and being loving. And it wasn't true love. It was either a very personal sense of it, or I wasn't actually loving. I might have been resenting or jealous or other things going on inside. But because I was a nice little Christian Science girl, I would put on that front of being loving. And that was just dreadful. Talk about dishonesty. And I didn't know I was doing it. I thought I was doing science, but you can't just say it and pretend. You've got to feel it. So if you have anyone you resent or are jealous of, you come to terms with those negative thoughts. Get where you truly do love. You don't ever have to love error, but you love the person, as we talk about. You separate the error from the person. Love the person. The error deserves to be condemned and destroyed. It's animal magnetism. But you've got to do this. Otherwise, you're living a hypocritical life, which is, again, it blocks your healing. I couldn't understand why I was having troubles and things weren't being healed. This basic dishonesty.
You only harm yourself by harboring these things, not getting them out.
So, Bruce, tell us about the story in the lesson this week. You wrote about it on the forum.
Yeah, I thought it was so interesting that Jehoshaphat approached the king of Israel and says, let's go inquire the word of the Lord. I mean, who wouldn't say yes to that? But instead, the first thing he did is he gathered around him 400 so-called prophets that he knew in his mind were going to agree with everything that he said, regardless of what it may have been. And I thought, how would you like to be one of those 400? You just said, oh, yes, 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 you're right. And the reason they did that is because they were fearful, I'm sure, of displeasing somebody else. But whereas Micaiah, who stood alone, one man, all by himself, but with his maker, and he was even punished for his position, thrown in jail. Yet he was proven to be right, because he did not sacrifice his conscience. He was honest with himself, with his God, and with his fellow man, whereas the other people were, I'm sure, fearful of their personal positions, whatever they may have been. At the sacrifice of honesty.
Yes. You know, I looked up, because in the lesson it says about the prophet have spoken it presumptuously, arrogantly, willful, in bold defense of conscience, with groundless and vain confidence in the divine will, insolently. So, you were speaking against the Lord when you're talking presumptuously. And do you surround yourself with only people who agree with everything you say? Are you willing to open your mind to correction, rebuke, or not? Always important. What does Mrs. Eddy say about rebuke?
And in charitableness, forgiveness.
Yes.
Rule for motives and acts.
Yes, that's a rule for motives and acts. And what else? If someone corrects you.
If there's any truth in it,
Speak up.
if there's any truth in it, I'll take it. If not, I'll drop it and go on.
That's it. And believe me, I'm always very grateful for constructive criticism. Always. That's in Love Your Enemies, too. That it can be your best friend, those who tell you the truth. And she talks about friends who just don't tell you the truth, and only tell you what you want to hear.
Perpetuate. It grows worse there.
Yes. And therefore, if you are a true friend to anyone, you have to tell the truth, not in a mean or cruel way, or not in a offensive way, but in a way out of some love to help, who is telling of the foe in ambush.
One of the writers on your website uses the analogy you're knocking poison, I think, out of someone's hand. See it as that.
Excellent.
You wouldn't let your friend drink poison.
It's a good way to think of it. That's exactly what you're doing. And you feel that, because when you speak out of love, the rebuke, you know your rebuke will reach that person.
And as a result, you have nothing to fear.
Even if it's not seen as, a loving, cautionary thing, it later will be seen as such.
Yes, yes. Just now, I'm going to refer now. A few weeks ago, I read a letter from someone, partly a letter from someone that evidently he had known or remembered Gary from years ago when Gary we lived in the Boston area. Gary was attending the Cambridge Church up there. And he had sent us some very interesting things. And one is an article called Isaiah's Job. And it was written by an Albert J. Nock. It says it was an influential American libertarian author, educationalist, theorist, and social critic and her early historian. So I'm going to I'll have Gary just read a few excerpts from it. Just read the text. Okay.
All of them.
Yeah, all of the text.
Okay. In the year of Uzziah's death, the Lord commissioned the prophet to go out and warn the people of the wrath to come. Tell them what a worthless lot they are, he said. Tell them what is wrong and why. and what is going to happen unless they have a change of heart and straighten up. Don't mince matters. Make it clear that they are positively down to their last chance. Give it to them good and strong, and keep on giving it to them. I suppose perhaps I ought to tell you, he added, that it won't do any good. The official class and their intelligentsia will turn up their noses at you, and the masses will not even listen. They will all keep on in their own ways until they carry everything down to destruction, and you will probably be lucky if you get out with your life. Isaiah had been very willing to take on the job. In fact, he had asked for it, but the prospect put on a new face on the situation. It raised the obvious question, why, if all that were so, if the enterprise were to be a failure from the start, was there any sense in starting it? Ah, the Lord said, you do not get the point. There is a remnant there that you know nothing about. They are obscure, unorganized, inarticulate, each one rubbing along as best he can. They need to be encouraged and braced up, because when everything has gone completely to the dogs, they are the ones who will come back and build up a new society. And meanwhile, your preaching will reassure them and keep them hanging on. Your job is to take care of the remnant. So be off now and set about it. Everyone with a message nowadays is eager to take it to the masses. His first, last, and only thought is of mass acceptance and mass approval. His great care is to put his doctrine in such shape as will capture the masses' attention and interest. The main trouble with this mass man approach is its reaction upon the mission itself. It necessitates an opportunistic sophistication of one's doctrine, which profoundly alters its character and reduces it to a mere placebo. Meanwhile, the remnant, aware of this adulteration and of the desires that prompt it, turn their backs on the prophet and will have nothing to do with him or his message.
So what's it saying here?
If you have any good message, it's not going to appeal to the masses.
Right.
And it's important to know your audience.
And know your audience.
But also not to get discouraged and turn away from the God-appointed mission.
Absolutely.
It's not the quantity, it's the quality.
Thank you. Thank you. These are important points with the work that we're doing, because at times, it's been recommended that we water down things or appeal to the masses.
Or rewrite Science and Health.
Yeah. As someone once did. But anyway, yeah, rewrite it so it's more understandable.
But can I just say something for just a few minutes?
Okay.
Very few.
Does it
It's
do
a good thing I'm here, because honestly, I'm learning something from Plainfield. Without that, I don't even know if I should be around by now. So being here is no problem, nothing at all. Hearing even your voice laughing is a healing to me. But as soon as I quit, that's it. That's why it's like I just keep on calling my practitioner, because anytime I hear something like support, everything is gone. As soon as I sit down to do something, it will come back to my mind again. And secondly, how do I listen or know this is the still small voice talking to me?
Thank you, Essie. Well, you know because of the peace it gives you. And I know when I once felt that way, that I could only think positively when I was reading or talking to my practitioner or whatever, I learned to take up my hymnal and sing, sometimes at the top of my voice. I memorized hymns. I thought about the words. It helped to keep my thoughts on God. Singing is a form of praising and thanksgiving, and it is very healing. And so you try that, work with that. If you're having trouble thinking correctly when you're not listening to your practitioner, when you're done, start singing hymns. Someone once told me you start at the beginning and sing at least 7 a day. I began memorizing them because that helped me focus. It takes some discipline of thought, but as I said, God has not given you the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And one of the interpretations of a sound mind is a disciplined mind. So you work at it. No one ever said it would be easy, especially when you had a habit of thinking all over the place, which I certainly did have that habit. I had to unhabit myself. And no, Mrs. Eddy says, the habitual struggle to be always good is what?
Unceasing prayer.
Thank you, Karen. Unceasing prayer. That's the only habit any of us have, is that habitual, and she says it's a struggle, to be always good.
I think the main thing here is not to be discouraged because you're doing it. But I tell you, it didn't take me just a few, years. It's taken a long time. But no matter what, if you stick with it, your desire is true, you will get the reward.
Yes, you will. And that's the tool of the devil, discouragement. And often, right before you're about to make great victories, it will try to get you to give up or change gears. You keep on. That song, we used to sing it in our church. Maybe we'll sing it again. When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high. And don't be afraid of the dark. Yeah. At the end of the storm, there's a golden sky and the sweet silver song of a lark. Walk on through the mist, walk on through the rain, so your dreams be tossed and blown.
Anyway, you get the picture.
Yes, there's another song I would sing, okay? That's why I know at least part of the words. I don't know I was exactly right, but that's songs you sing to yourself. His eye is on the sparrow. Sing those songs. Encourage yourself in the Lord.
And there's, it's always darkest just before the dawn. So when it seems the most dark, hang on. And also, when when error is cornered, when it's backed into a corner, and it knows that it's about to be extinguished, is when it puts up its fiercest fight.
That's why you don't get discouraged if it gets worse before it gets better. It often does get worse before it gets better. So be prepared. It's testing you. Oh, you say all this stuff? Well, we'll see. Let's have a little more rain going on this test.
Honestly, it took me a long time. It took a while anyway, after I got to this church, to realize that we're in a warfare. I didn't want to do battle. I didn't want to have to go to war. I thought life was supposed to be nice. And I got sloomed. And I couldn't discipline my thinking. It was only when I accepted the fact that there is a warfare going on. So accept it, deal with it, and, get the right tools for the job. And be willing to fight to protect my consciousness, to protect my life. That's what's at stake here. Once I accepted that there was a battle going on, then really everything started to change.
It's very good that Mrs. Eddy explained animal magnetism.
Yeah, because the battle is what?
Your conscience.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. The battle is the Lord's, and the battle is mental, not a battle of people.
Yeah, and it's always wanting you to believe that there is a power apart from God, whether it claims it's a person, place, or thing. There's some power apart from God. It wants you to believe that. And if it gets you, if it mesmerizes you into believing that, it's gotcha moment. So you question it. And if it's not good, it's not of God.
I'd like to read a verse from Habakkuk.
Okay.
So it says here, though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vine, though the olive crop fails, and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen, and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord, and I will be joyful in God, my Savior.
Thank you.
Good. Perfect.
And why should you do that? Why not?
In our lesson, right? Florence wrote about it. She said that you had to be grateful. It was one of the citations, I don't know, giving numbers for fun.
Right. But again,
Because we're grateful for life, for truth, and for love, regardless of what the outward appearance might be.
and by knowing it, you will bring the outward appearance. You will change that outward appearance to what is the truth. It might not happen overnight, but it will happen. But if you fall under it, then, well, it's not good. And then you're going to even have a bigger hole to pull yourself out of. So I always remind myself that with that. Go ahead.
By having that faith, you get manna in the wilderness for 40 years.
That's it. Yep. They were certainly grumbling along, though. So.
Same food every day.
I know.
Throughout the year.
I know.
40 years.
I know it. And, you know, this idea, we were talking about that to be grateful. It's on the forum, I can't quote it exactly, but Mrs. Eddy says to every moment of every day to acknowledge all the good that's coming to you, the source in God, and to be grateful for it will do more for you than anything else can. That cements this connection to God. The uniting of your heart to God is this continual gratitude. And, the really good workers that I've known have been that way. They're tough on error. They're tough as can be on error, but boy, are they grateful the rest of the time. They're always thanking God and always seeing the good. So it's a combination of both. And I don't want to let that remnant thing slide away because it's very important. Someone tried to tell me that unity was mass mesmerism. Now, that's just absurd. Mass mesmerism has nothing to do with unity. Unity is the one mind in God, and that's something very different. And usually the remnant is in some way connected with that one mind, one purpose. They're receiving directly the divine power, maybe because what they're doing is so unselfish. And there are many all around. The article brings out how in the Bible, who was it, Elijah or one of them, thought he was the last one left. And God said, no, there are a whole lot of others. Don't worry about it.
They're out there.
7,000 more.
Yeah, thank you, yes. And so it is. So we must never get discouraged and keep on working with joy, nor try to water down the message or think that Mrs. Eddy's message needs to be watered down to appeal to the masses. It does not. It won't work. It will not work. You go to all that trouble to do it, and they still won't get it. Trust me, I've tried. So,
well, Christian Science is the truth, and truth is absolute. And
yes.
so it can't go any other way.
Right.
That's it. It is absolute.
And the remnant gets it.
Yes.
Yeah, and anyone who truly desires to will get it if they're patient and work accordingly.
Thank you.
With an open heart.
Yes.
The watering down in Boston of science was a kind of downfall. Trying to, and I could see how I tried that myself. Thinking, oh, they're doing it in Boston, I can do it too. And skipping through life, it was a big, fat, dishonest lie. I mean, it really was coming here when we talk about honesty. It's not always fun to be honest, but it certainly it heals. And I didn't get any healing by being dishonest.
Yes. Bare your soul before God. He knows everything anyway, so you can't try to trick him or think you can cover things up. You just are totally honest. And when you are, healing does come. Healing is possible. Truth is such a major point in science, something we must revere and respect and live up to as much as is within us. Now I'm going to have Gary read again from our article, What Prospers Healing by Keaston. Let's see how far we get. But
Here.
if we can.
Okay. Okay, this section is entitled Intellectuality versus Spirituality. Mary Baker Eddy had much to contend with in her day with, quote, intellectuality, what we call intellectualism today. Joseph Mann, a treasured student of our leaders, has preserved the essence of some of these instructive trials that even today obscure in greatest measure a proper understanding of the woman and retard the healing progress of our cause. Plausible intellectualists was the term employed by Joseph Mann in describing those opposers of Mrs. Eddy's day that through their own human concept, quote, intelligence in matter, resisted the true spiritual sense of Mary Baker Eddy, the right sense that is so necessary to seeing her as God sees her. This spiritual sense, based in gratitude and reverence for her, is essential for success of healing and growth in our church. Do not believe what I say regarding this. Find out for yourself. Study what our leader has said and written. Read what her early loyal students, some of the finest healers, knew and said about her in the periodicals and in their correspondence. It is all there for those with eyes to see. In his Reminiscences of Mary Baker Eddy, Mr. Mann relates, I saw in the beginning how foolish and futile it was to tell Mrs. Eddy something plausible. My heart could only be honest around her. Mr. Mann speaks from his experience as a student of Mary Baker Eddy. In regard to the factionists of his day, he spoke of their, quote, conceit of intellectuality, which they believed superior to Mrs. Eddy's spirituality, end quote. Have you ever seen this reminiscence by Joseph Mann or his 1923 class instruction? Why not? Why does the field not have access to these invaluable records concerning our leader? Why have these insightful items been kept from the field? Remember our leader's warning. The enemy tries harder to hide Mrs. Eddy's true light and life from the world than to win any other points. Memoirs and reminiscences of John Salcho, Henrietta Chanfrew, Joseph Mann, just to name a few, have been kept from the field. The only way one can see this information is to physically travel to Boston, request permission to read the particular item from the archives, and even then, one may not be able to view it, or if they can, they cannot take notes. Why hide these accounts containing wonderful lessons of such spiritual import? Yet our church is perfectly willing to promote in as wide a manner as possible humanistic interpretations by those who never knew our leader, and who certainly have not demonstrated understanding of Christian Science on a par with those who work in our leader's vineyard. Why? What purpose does this serve except to obscure further Mrs. Eddy's true light and life?
Thank you. It certainly goes along with our discussion on truth. And just so, because I know sometimes I think people think when we have a discussion like this that we are resentful toward the BOD. We are not resentful toward the BOD, but the truth has to be exposed, doesn't it? And it's in the lesson. When needed, tell the truth concerning the lie. Evasion of truth cripples integrity and casts thee down from the pinnacle. We have to expose it. Mrs. Eddy says, error exposed is 2/3 destroyed, and the final third destroys itself. We don't personalize it or see it in any person or even a church. It's animal magnetism that would try to destroy Mrs. Eddy's science, which of course it can't. But it must be exposed, and many people don't know this, so we let them know, so they do know the truth. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. But it's not because we're resentful or we have to talk about it in a mean kind of spirited way. It has nothing to do with that. That's that nice sense that doesn't understand what it is to tell the truth and to be unafraid to tell the truth. So we will now have a powerful service on the truth. And thank you all for joining us at our roundtable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.